up guys, so now that I've seen Pixar's 23rd movie Soul, I thought now's as good a time as any to do one of them Pixar ranking videos. So they're gonna go through all 23 Pixar movies and rank them. Believe me, it's a lot harder than it sounds. I know there's a lot of love for Pixar, there's a lot of passionate Pixar fans out there, so I just want to take a second to say that this list, this ranking, is just one bloke's opinion, alright? It's subjective, okay? We all have different tastes, we all respond to Pixar movies differently. Some of the ones that I love, you might not necessarily love, and some of the ones that I find average, you might love, and that's fine, okay? All I ask is that you guys respect my opinion, and I will respect yours. There's no need to get vicious in the comment section. Please do share your opinion if you do agree with me or disagree. But this video is meant to be in fun, okay? This is an appreciation of Pixar movies, okay? There's no need to get mean. Alright, so let's get started. I'll be going from my least favorite Pixar movie to my favorite. Okay, so kicking off the list at number 23, we have my least favorite of all the Pixar films. It is John Lasseter's Cars 2. While not a completely unwatchable film, Cars 2 feels like the Pixar movie with the least amount of thought, effort, energy, and love put into it. In short answer, it just felt lazy. The main problem that I had with Cars 2 is that the plot is very weak and it brings the character of Tomato center stage, and I always found him to be an annoying, clownish character, and the fact that he is center stage and a spy in this film is just very childish and juvenile. Pixar movies are great at appealing to both kids and adults. This feels like a direct-to-DVD movie that was meant just for kids, okay? There's not much pleasure to be had from it as an adult. Plus, this film came out just after Toy Story 3. When you compare those films side by side, emotionally, they don't compare. Cars 2 is my least favorite Pixar movie by a good distance. Alright, next up we have Cars 3. I've never been a big fan of the Cars franchise. It always felt like a franchise that was made just to make merchandise. What makes Cars 3 slightly better than Cars 2 is that this one is a bit more fun, the story is stronger, and it also does wrap things up in a satisfying way for the Cars series, although the third act twist didn't really agree with me. But again, it's another film where it's primarily aimed at children. It's a film which I thought was okay enough while watching, but I would never choose to rewatch. Alright, next up we have Peterson's The Good Dinosaur. Like the asteroid which didn't hit the planet in this movie, Peterson's The Good Dinosaur made no impact. This was Pixar's 16th film and their first bona fide flop. I appreciate how they tried to make a kid-friendly western with dinosaurs, but everything about this film, apart from the stunning photorealistic scenery, was meh. It also didn't help that it followed in the footsteps of Pete Docter's immensely intelligent and enjoyable Inside Out that very same year, a film that was quite literally packed with gushy emotions. That film will be treasured forever. However, with The Good Dinosaur, it's already extinct in the public consciousness. If you guys want more movie and TV content just like this, don't forget to click that subscribe button. Next up, we have the first Cars movie, the best of the Cars trilogy. However, I remember when I saw this in the cinema, this was the first time I felt let down by a Pixar film. It was a new feeling and I didn't care for it. It's not a bad movie, but this was definitely Pixar's first noticeable misstep. I enjoyed the classic American feel of this movie, but I still couldn't help feeling shortchanged with Cars. I've only ever watched this film one time. I've never felt the need to rewatch it, and that's kind of because I feel like this film does cater exclusively to children. And apart from Lightning McQueen and Tomato, I don't really remember any of the other supporting characters. I don't really remember much of what happens in the story. It didn't leave much of an impression. There was no impact from Cars. And yeah, I just think it's a bit forgettable, this one. Okay, so next up at number 19, we have Monsters University. As a big fan of the Mike and Sully duo, I was down for another adventure with these two, but this prequel follow-up just feels rather pointless. There is some fun to be had with it, but it really doesn't have anything to say. There really isn't much of a fluffy Pixar message in this film. It's just a story of two friends meeting at college. It's a pretty inconsequential prequel. It was only mildly funny compared to Monsters Inc., and it also didn't move me in the least. Next we have Mark Andrews and Brenda Chapman's Brave. Now, it was nice to see a Pixar film which tackled a mother-daughter storyline. However, Brave sadly missed the mark for me. I mean, it looks gorgeous, but Brave kind of feels like two movies in one. You've got the first plot about Merida wanting to remain independent and not be forced into marriage, and then you've got the second plot about Merida's mom turning into a bear. The problem with these two plots is that they don't harmonize together, they actually collide. I don't think the storyline was ever fully realized, and it does show in the end product. On reflection, Brave is fine, but it doesn't have enough to bring me back again and again. Next up, we have Onward, the fantasy road trip trip about two brothers trying to bring back their dead father for one day had potential. I was all for an original Pixar film after the influx of sequels that we had. But ironically, Onward, a film which is all about magic, seemed to lack the magic of a Pixar movie. It's by no means bad, it's perfectly watchable, the characters are likable, and it packs a heavy emotional punch with its finale. But everything before the finale felt rather lackluster to me. The subplot about Laurel and the Manticore felt underbaked. The look and design of this world was quite unimaginative. I mean, for a film that's populated with mythological creatures, the production design was so bland and uninspired. It didn't transport me to a world that I wanted to visit, and that's something that Pixar is usually great with. There's a lot of good in Onward, but there's also a lot of noticeable faults of it, which is why it's a middle tier Pixar film for me. Alright, so next up we have another sequel, Finding Dory. Dory is one of my favourite Pixar characters of all time. She is part of the reason why Finding Nemo ranks so high on this list, but more on that later. It took 13 years for her to get her own film, and while it's a perfectly good film, it doesn't hit the same emotional high notes as its predecessor, and the reason for that is because the plot is essentially recycled from Finding Nemo. It hits a lot of the same beats, it hits a lot of the same narrative points. It's very similar in that sense, and because of that, it's not as fresh. Plus, there's a lot of conveniences in the plot, so many containers of water for the fish to jump into in order to keep the plot moving. The animation is certainly more exquisite than the first film, and while you do have a good time watching it, it's just not as rewatchable as Finding Nemo. Alright, next up is one which a lot of people might not agree with me, because I know there's a lot of love for this film, but it's just not one that struck a chord with me as deeply as others. It's Brad Bird's Ratatouille. I know there's a lot of love for this film, but for some reason, it's never a film that I found the need to revisit. It's a film I enjoyed, but didn't rave about. It's got a lovely story with a protagonist that I should connect with, because it's all about a rat who's a little bit different from the other rats. He wants to be a chef, which is a little bit insane to all the other rats. It's a film for the fools who dare to dream, like myself. And it's got that lovely anyone can cook message, but I've never had a deep love for this film. I've got no bad blood against it, I'm just not in love with it like I am other Pixar films. Alright, this is where it starts getting really difficult now, because all the remaining films left to talk about are all amazing in my eyes. Okay, next we have a film which I think is a little bit underrated. For some reason it has a little bit of a bad reputation in the Pixar canon, but I love it. It's Pixar's second feature film, A Bug's Life. I really enjoy this film. I think the plot is really strong. It's got so many great characters in it. Flick, Dot, Francis, Heimlich, Slim. It's also got one of the best villains in the Pixar canon with Hopper. But what keeps A Bug's Life from greatness is that A, it followed in the footsteps of Toy Story, which is quite frankly a masterpiece, and B, the limitations of the technology at the time held it back. I mean, if this film had been made like 10, 15 years later, say like 2018, just think of how detailed and texturized the environments would be now, because the story of A Bug's Life is great. It's just, overall, the look of it isn't that exciting. But I still love A Bug's Life. I think it is massively underrated. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comment section down below. Next on the countdown, we have Pete Docter and Kemp Soul. I thought long and hard about where to put Soul on this countdown, because I imagine a lot of you would have clicked on this to see how it measures up against the other Pixar heavyweights, and some of you might be a bit disappointed to see it come somewhere in the middle, but don't be disheartened. I really love Soul. It's one of the most bold, original, intelligent, and out there entries in the Pixar catalog. The animation is next level. The soundtrack is so unique and effective. If you guys want my full thoughts, I'll put the link to the spoiler-free review up there. The only reason it's not higher on the list is that it didn't hit me in the emotional sweet spot as hard as Pete Docter's other masterpieces, Up, Inside Out, or even Monsters, Inc. It's definitely a film I want to watch again and again and again. However, I can only go off my reaction of having seen it once, and while it certainly moved me, it didn't move me as far as Pete Docter's other work. Alright, moving on. Next up, we have Lee Unkrich's Coco. Oh, the places we go in Coco. Coco has some of the most vibrant and imaginative visuals of any Pixar movie. The soundtrack is sensational, it's packed with emotion, the last 15 minutes are so heart-tuggy and uplifting. And it also handles such a delicate subject, death, with care and sensitivity. What lets Coco down is that a lot of the supporting characters aren't particularly memorable, and the last third of the film is quite predictable and conventional. But this film has so much heart and passion. I would go as far as saying it's Pixar's most gorgeous film. Okay, next up we have Incredibles 2, a sequel which took 14 years to arrive, but my goodness, was it worth waiting for. I adored Incredibles 2. It's one of the strongest sequels in the Pixar canon. It's a sequel which builds upon its foundations and stays so true to itself, that being that Brad Bird made a family film first and a superhero action movie second. The action though is bigger and more inventive. It mixes things up with the parental dynamics, with Elastigirl being center stage and Mr. Incredible being a stay-at-home dad. And it also has a genius and underrated villain in my eyes, a screenslaver who feels like they were lifted right out of a Black Mirror episode. And because of its villain, this is a Pixar sequel with something meaningful to say. If you guys want to follow me on any social media, Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd, all those links are in that video description down below. Top 10 now, this is getting so hard. Coming in at number 10, we have Pete Docter's first ever feature film for Pixar, Monsters, Inc. While Monsters, Inc. isn't the most emotionally impactful Pixar film, it is so much fun, so well written, so well paced. The concept is genius with the whole monsters in the closet but flipped on its head. This was the first time that Pixar had dabbled in world building, and they do such a good job of establishing Monstropolis and how it all works. The pairing of Mike and Sully is one of the best duos in cinema, period. And also the relationship between Boo and Sully gives the film its heart. Monsters, Inc. never stops being a good time. Alright, we've come to the first Toy Story entry on this list, Pixar's golden franchise, which can do no wrong. Depending on who you ask, everyone has a different opinion on how to rank all four of these films, so please don't get upset if you don't agree with how I rank them. These films are like perfection. And who knows, I might change my mind in a few months' time. My opinion of these films goes up and down all the time. First up is Toy Story 2. This film is class. The story is actually a lot richer than the first. There's more emotion because the introduction of the new characters, Jessie, Bullseye, and prospector Pete, were not only welcome additions, but it brought in the whole angle of like, kids grow up and toys aren't wanted anymore. The whole Jessie, When Somebody Loved Me song is when Pixar legitimized their validity as one of the best production companies for producing films in the world. Toy Story 2 is amazing. Okay, next up we have a future classic, Wall.e. I'm gonna take a moment now for all you guys at home to go, Wall.e. So cute. Andrew Stanton's Wall.e makes my heart swoon. It's such gorgeous storytelling, proving that Pixar didn't need a load of dialogue to make you fall in love. Wall.e and Eve are one of cinema's greatest on-screen romantic couples. I mean, they're robots, they're not meant to feel love, but you feel the love between them, and the animation of their eyes and the way they talk, oh my god, it just makes me so gooey with watching it. Oh, I freaking love this film. Every single frame of this film is visually stunning, and it has so many great messages about consumerism, the dangers of instant gratification, gluttony and greed, how wasteful we are as a species and how we're destroying the planet. I did prefer the more intimate first half of this film compared to the space adventure second half, but this film just works, not only as a Pixar film, but also as a piece of science fiction. It actually transcends beyond being just a Pixar film. Alright, next up we have the concluding chapter of the Toy Story franchise, or at least I hope it's the concluding chapter, is Josh Cooley's Toy Story 4. This film had no right being as good as it was. We were all skeptical because of how perfectly they ended Toy Story 3, but Toy Story 4 was a welcomed and needed epilogue to the Toy Story saga. Toy Story 4 wrapped up all the loose ends like what happened to Bo Peep. It also introduced new and lovable characters like Duke Kaboom, Forky, and one of the most complex and sympathetic villains we've ever had with Gabby Gabby. And it also wrapped up Woody's own personal arc to a bittersweet and cathartic end. Next up we have another gem from Pete Docter. It's the heartwarming adventure film Up. This film is so rewatchable, it brings me endless joy. The masterful 10-minute opening sequence has become the benchmark to which all storytelling is now held to. It has yet to be topped. The characters are some of my favorites: Carl, Russell, Doug, and Kevin. My name is Doug. I have just met you, and I love you. Squirrel! The score by Michael Giacchino is one of the most iconic and memorable of any film, let alone Pixar. Do-do-do-do. Oh, my heart. It's a story which whisks you away to fantastical destinations with vibrant set pieces, laughter, adventure, and heart. The only downside for me is that I thought its villain, Charles Muntz, was a little bit underdeveloped. But it's no wonder why Up is one of only 2 Pixar films to ever be nominated for Best Picture, and in my eyes, it would have been such a worthy winner. Find the bird, find the bird, find the bird, point! If you guys are enjoying this video, please help me out by hitting that thumbs up button. It really does help. Alright, coming into the top 5 now. Next up we have Brad Bird's domestic superhero movie, The Incredibles. An exhilarating, hilarious, action-packed joyride with an ooey-gooey message about family at the core. The Incredibles is what a good Fantastic Four movie should look like. And that's shade. In my eyes, The Incredibles is a perfect family film. You've got a colourful cast of characters, a relatable midlife crisis protagonist with Mr. Incredible, which the adults can connect with. It's got a little bit of a screwball comedy vibe, and it's also got its own aesthetic in the Pixar universe because it blends the 60s with the superhero genre. And it also has a villain which was way ahead of its time, with Syndrome being the very embodiment of entitled toxic fandom. This was Pixar's first all-human film, so some of the animation is a little bit dated in places, it's not as detailed, but the story is so well constructed and so well paced, there's not a single moment in The Incredibles which feels dull or wasted. The Incredibles is such glorious entertainment. Okay, next up we have Andrew Stanton's Finding Nemo. You wanna know how much I love this movie? I used to be able to recite this movie from start to end on the bus to school. That's how cool 13-year-old Luke was. He knew all the words to Finding Nemo. He'd speak whale on the bus. We need to find his son. Yes, I was a very cool teenager. But I don't care, this movie occupies such a special place in my heart. You've got such a lovely story about an overprotective dad trying to find his son and learning to let go. You've got one of the best supporting characters of any film ever made, the comic relief Dory, voiced perfectly by Ellen DeGeneres. Escape! Yeah, it's funny, it's spelled just like the word escape. You got a problem with me? Do ya? Do ya? Do ya? The sea monkey's got my money. Yes, I'm a natural blue. Oh, and the wisdom of Dory. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming. What do? We swim, swim. Ho, 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 ho. Yep, I've seen this movie way too many times. It's a movie I connected to as a kid, it's a movie I still love as an adult, and it's a film I cannot wait to watch with my own children someday. Coming in at number 3, we have the film which kick-started it all. Yes, that's right, I'm talking about Toy Story! Considering how far the leaps in technology that Pixar has made, it's remarkable how Toy Story, their first ever film, still holds up to this day as one of their strongest films. A timeless tale about toys coming to life when the owner Andy isn't looking, and the rivalry between his 2 favorite toys, Woody and Buzz, voiced perfectly by Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. It explores friendship, jealousy, being replaced, and the fleeting nature of childhood. Toy Story was groundbreaking. It was the first ever fully computer animated film, and it ushered in a completely new era of cinema. But with the hundreds of computer animated films which have followed in its footsteps since then, seldom have any reached the acclaim and appreciation that the first Toy Story has. It's still so beloved to this day, and that's because the story is so strong. It's so simple, but so well executed. The characters have all become household names, and the score by Randy Newman has become timeless. When I hear the word Pixar, my mind immediately goes to Toy Story. This film is going to be remembered to infinity and beyond. At number 2, we have the last and most emotionally effective of all the Pete Docter films. Literally, this film is all about emotions. It's Inside Out. Inside Out is one of those movies which I put on to remind me that everything is going to be okay. It's the cinematic equivalent of a warm hug. It's a profoundly clever film which has some healthy messages about emotions that are applicable to both kids and adults. It has such a cerebral plot, literally taking place inside the mind of an 11-year-old girl, but it's so well thought out that kids can follow it with ease and adults can just bawl their eyes out. It's fun, it's original, all the characters are lovable, joy, sadness, bing bong, good lord bing bong. It doesn't put a single foot out of place. This is Pixar at their most intelligent. And here we are at number 1. My favorite Pixar movie for now is the film which I associate with saying goodbye to my own childhood. It's Lee Unkrich's Toy Story 3. I've gushed about this film before in my top 100 movies of the decade. Really, there's nothing I can say here which I haven't said better in that video. But Toy Story 3 is a masterpiece. By the third film, we've become so familiarized with these characters that they were practically our own flesh and blood, which is why we had so much emotional investment in Toy Story 3. It's another Pixar film which is so perfectly plotted. The structure is fantastic. It moves at such a great pace. The last third of the film is riveting. You've got the Prison Break-esque jailbreak from the Sunnyside daycare, followed by the furnace, and then the final playtime with Andy and all of his toys. And in my eyes, this film is about as close to perfection as you can get. If there were any justice in the world, Toy Story 3 should have won Best Picture at the Academy Awards that year. But yeah, this film means so much to me personally, and that's why it's my #1 Pixar film. But as always, guys, it's just one bloke's opinion. I want to hear from you. What are your personal Pixar rankings? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you did like this video, please help me out by hitting that like button, and if you want more movie and TV content just like this, don't forget to click subscribe. If you want to hear me gush about Toy Story 3 and Inside Out, be sure to check out this video, and if you want to hear my thoughts on Soul, be sure to check out that video. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. For more things related to movies, TV, and popcorn culture, I'm Luke Airfield, and I'll see you next time.